right, great to see all these introductions. Let's go ahead and get started. Really appreciate, again, welcome to all of those of you that are here. We're going to continue to welcome folks in from the waiting room. You're here at the Grazing Lands Conservation Initiative, Navigating the Application Process webinar. It's co-hosted by the Wallace Center, the Michael Fields Agricultural Institute, National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition, and the National Grazing Lands Coalition. I'm Pete. I work here at the Wallace Center, and I'm going to be joined by a bunch of different colleagues and friends here of the GLCI program that can introduce themselves as they go, and we're all going to share information and stories that can help you potentially pursue your interest in this funding program that's open right now from the USDA. As you're aware, this program is $22 million. If you're not, now you know, and it's open until May 26th. And really, this GLCI program is a fantastic program, and we'll talk about what it is in terms of a funding opportunity, how it's being used, and we'll share some resources and some other opportunities for you to plug in. But really, the GLCI program is aimed at supporting organizations that are promoting, the good and sustainable management of grazing lands across the United States. The Wallace Center and the co-hosting organizations that we're working with on this webinar for you today really believe in grazing lands and the livestock and the producers that work on those lands. And we see the benefits that they bring, not just to ecosystems, but also to farm viability and to food systems and growing good food and other products for folks. So we're really excited to share this opportunity. We're going to break it down, as I mentioned, the actual funding opportunity, so you know the kind of the must-dos to move yourself from where you are to hopefully some funding to do your grazing work. We're going to hear from some current folks that are GLCI grantees in different parts of the country, so you can get a sense of what this looks like on the ground. And then, as I mentioned, we're going to share some resources, some opportunities to connect with each other, and then we're also going to make some time for questions. So I want to make sure that you have your questions answered as much as possible. What we don't get to today, we'll definitely come back to offline and try to get you the information that you need. One thing I just want to mention right off the bat is that we're not the USDA. This is not a USDA webinar. The organizations that are putting this on really believe in this program and want it to be successful, and we want you to be successful in it. And that we do stay in communication with USDA, and they know about this webinar and know that it's happening, but we will often maybe point you in the direction of USDA resources if you have specific questions that are just beyond what we know as entities and hosts here. And so, yeah, that will happen towards the end. We'll give you some information on the USDA program. So just quick housekeeping here. I think we're all familiar with Zoom at this point in life. If not, just a couple reminders there. Please keep yourself on mute during this your presentation, just so we don't get any background noise. So we want to make sure that if you're not speaking, you're on mute. You're also welcome to turn on your camera. You also totally don't have to. It's your call, whatever you'd like to do. We are recording this webinar right now, so just to be aware of that, and that recording will be available on the Wallace Center website and YouTube channel. As I mentioned, put your questions in the chat. It's a great spot. We'll keep track of those. We'll grab them as they come through, and we'll do our best to come back to them. We might smush some questions together if they're really similar, and we'll try to answer a bunch of questions in one pass. The last thing is just keep an eye on the chat. You might see some people that are already introducing themselves that aren't that far from you, and maybe that's a person that could work or a group that could work together on a GLCI application that really rewards collaboration. So start looking for folks that maybe you don't know that you might want to work with that are not too far from you. And also we're going to put some links into the chat for places that you can go for more info. So I'm going to stop there. That's plenty of introduction here. And we're going to just jump right in. So I'm going to pass it off to my colleague, Jane, who's going to break down the GLCI funding opportunity for you and give you some of the nuts and bolts of the funding. So Jane, hand it off to you.
Yeah, thanks, Pete. Hello, everyone. Good to be with you today. My name is Jane Jordan, and I work with Pete at the Wallace Center based in Chicago. And I'm going to walk through highlights of the Notice of Funding opportunity for the GLCI program. The goal here is to give you all a basic sense of what the NRCS priorities for the program are, the types of projects the program is designed to fund, and what goes into an application. If you decide, or if you've already decided that this program is a fit for you and your organization, and you want to apply, we'd really encourage you to spend some time with that notice of funding opportunity. It's only 31 pages long. I've read it a couple times. It's not that bad. And there's a lot more detail in there about what NRCS is looking for specifically in these applications. But we'll get you started here. So to run through a couple highlights from the NOFO, the funding agency for this, as we've said, is the USDA Natural Resource and Conservation Service. GLCI differs from other NRCS programs in that it's specifically focused on grazing outreach and education. We know other USDA NRCS programs like EQIP tend to funnel a fair amount of money towards confinement livestock operations. This one is dedicated for grazing outreach and education. There's $22 million available this year in funding in 2 pools. The first pool is a larger pool that's available for 3 to 4 year projects and has a ceiling of $1 million. And then the second pool is for shorter projects and has a ceiling of $300,000. So if you decide to apply, your project should fit into one of those 2 pools. There's no match required, which is great. We love to see it. And there are indirect cost limitations. So if you're a nonprofit or an institution of higher education, you're limited to 10%. Other types of eligible applicants can use their negotiated indirect cost rate agreement if they have one, or take that 10% de minimis rate. Just to make a point, there are the types of applicants that are eligible for this opportunity are listed here. You'll notice that individuals are not eligible to apply for this program. So this is a program that's designed for organizations. Strong applications will include farmer input and participation, but this is not a program that's designed for individual farmers to go and get funding for their operations. And like Pete said, applications are due in a little over 6 weeks on May 26th. NRCS has said that they'll make notifications by June 25th, which is pretty quick turnaround. So we'll see if they stick to that timeline. And then are planning to execute agreements by September 30th. So this program is looking to move pretty quickly. To start here and talk a little bit about the types of activities that this program is designed to fund. And the rest of this information is directly from that notice of funding opportunity. So this is what NRCS has stated as their priorities for the program. The first thing is technical assistance, writing and implementing grazing plans, whole farm planning, demonstrating grazing technologies like virtual fence. These are all things that NRCS is looking to fund through the program. Also education, things like conferences, workshops, and webinars. We'll hear more about some of those types of opportunities from Christian. Things like grazing networks, peer-to-peer knowledge exchange, mentorship programs, NRCS workforce development, youth outreach, and then there's a note here that there will be some funds available for research as they relate to education and outreach type of opportunities. Someone had reached out and asked about projects that support TA for small ruminants, and that's absolutely eligible under this program. I know at least one goat project was funded in the last round, so this is not just a program for cattle. Projects are eligible across the country, so there was another question about whether this was a program for rangelands or included improved pasture lands that we see in the Midwest, for example. And the answer is that this program is designed to support grazing technical assistance across the country on rangelands and on improved pasture. And to answer another question we got, this project is designed specifically to support technical assistance and outreach. So our understanding is that NRCS is prioritizing projects that focus on that technical assistance rather than on projects that include financial assistance like cost share for grazing infrastructure. So more of an emphasis on that technical assistance than on financial assistance, but I think a very fundable program might include technical assistance to support producers in navigating other financial assistance programs like EQIP. But I think compensation for producers for their participation in things like a mentorship program or as a field day host are totally eligible under this program, but definitely more of an emphasis on that technical assistance. So NRCS has also defined 5 priority areas, and projects have to fit into at least one of these 5 priority areas. Those 5 are addressing local natural resource concerns. So this could be related to things like soil health, wildlife habitat, water quality. The second is utilizing climate smart ag. This might be a project that provides conservation planning to address an impact of climate change, like flooding or wildfire mitigation risk. The third thing that we know USDA is looking for in projects is an emphasis on underserved communities. So USDA has a definition for what they mean by underserved communities. That could be a project that emphasizes technical assistance and outreach to first-generation ranchers or to tribal producers. The fourth is this emphasis on quantification and monitoring of conservation benefits related to grazing practices. So you might think about soil carbon analysis or water monitoring. And then the fifth stated priority from NRCS is utilizing traditional ecological knowledge where applicable. So that might include something like a bison management or restoration program. So we know NRCS has given us some examples of eligible activities. Projects have to fit into, again, at least one of these priority areas. And then the third thing that NRCS has provided in the NOFO is a list of how they're going to evaluate projects and the types of projects that they're going to prioritize. So we know that NRCS is going to prioritize projects that promote grazing management, projects that have a long-term plan for funding beyond the life of the award, are led by organizations primarily serving primarily historically underserved producers, or that are led by tribal organizations. And we also know that NRCS is looking for collaborative proposals, so proposals that include 3 or more organizations as a partnership and also have significant farmer rancher involvement. And then again, we see this emphasis on quantification and monitoring as something that NRCS is going to be looking for and prioritizing in their evaluation of projects. To talk about briefly the application requirements for this program. This is all pretty standard from USDA. The first thing to note is that submission is through grants.gov. If you're new to grants.gov, I would definitely give yourself some time to familiarize yourself with the platform. It can be confusing and a little clunky. So don't wait till the final hour to submit. Make your account early and take a look at all that's in there. The application requirements are listed here. I won't go through them all. But you'll need a project narrative, a work plan, some information on your organization and all your partners, a budget. The budget gets entered directly into grants.gov, and NRCS provides examples of what that form looks like in advance. So again, take a look at that. One thing to highlight here is that you need to be registered in sam.gov. SAM stands for the System for Award Management. Before you apply. So you need to be registered in that system, which is the system that the federal government used to track all entities that they do business with. And when you register in that system, you'll get a UEI number, which is the identifier for your entity. And so if you've already applied for federal funding before, you should have this number. You do need to renew your SAM registration on an annual basis. So check on that if it's been a while. But if this might be your first time applying for federal funding, make sure you start this process soon because it can take several weeks to register and get that UEI number. Process is totally free, but it takes a couple of weeks to move through. The final thing I'll just touch on here is how NRCS is going to review applications to the program. Again, all this is in the NOFO. And there's a lot more information about specifically how applications will be reviewed in there. This is just highlights. The first thing I'll note is that there'll be an initial screening for completeness and compliance. This is true of most USDA programs. They're going to look at if you followed all of the expectations and requirements set out in the NOFO. So another point for reading the NOFO carefully and making sure that you've checked all the boxes that they're asking for and have attached all the documents that you need. The next thing that'll happen through the review is that applications will be evaluated on a merit and technical basis. And that process will focus on 4 things. The first thing will be project consistency with GLCI purpose and priorities. That's things like, is the process addressing a clear need? Are project objectives realistic and defined? Will the project promote technical assistance to historically underserved producers? The second point is on organizational support and partnerships. So that'll be things like, does the primary applicant have experience providing grazing technical assistance? Are personnel roles clearly defined? Is the applicant partnering with other organizations? The third thing is the project work plan. So that's things like, are activities permissible and things that are stated priorities for GLCI? Does the applicant plan to measure progress and other objectives? And then does the applicant describe how the project will continue after GLCI funding? So they really want to see a long-term plan for how the work will continue. And then the fourth part of that merit and technical review will be the budget. So is the amount requested sufficient to cover the project? Does the budget narrative include an explanation of all the costs, that kind of thing? So again, there's a lot more information on all of this in the notice of funding opportunity. So make sure to check that out. And then the final piece to just mention is that once that notice of selection of funding is made, there'll be a final administrative check that will happen, which is just to make sure the applicant is fully eligible and budget items are allowable and things like that. So that's a lot of info. Happy to answer questions in the Q&A. And we'll also put the slide deck and make it available to you all. But for now, I'm going to pass it back to Pete so he can introduce Felicia and Christian to talk about what some of these GLCI funded projects look like.
Yeah, thanks, Jane. A lot of information, so thank you, Jane. Love the people that read all of the fine print, and certainly come back to that with questions that you all have. In the chat is the link to the grants.gov notice of funding opportunity. So that's really what you need to read. And there's some other attachments in there that you should familiarize yourself with. Going through it front to back is a great place to start. But before we kind of get into questions, again, you can put those in the chat, hold them for the Q&A here at the end. We wanted you to see what this looks like. That's a lot of application information and government requirements, but there's some really great work that's happening out there with some current GLCI grantees, and we're very honored to have them with us here today to share about some of their work. So we're first going to hear from Felicia Bell. I'm very lucky to have Felicia on with us from the National Center for Appropriate Technology and talking about their GLCI program and what's happening there in the Gulf States region. So I think we're going to pass it over to you, Felicia, if you want to introduce yourself and share your screen with your slides.
Thank you, Pete. Let me bring up my slide. And thank you for the invitation. So my name is Felicia Bell. I'm the regional coordinator for the Gulf States office and wanted to start out briefly, who are we? So many people I've worked with, even in our region, still don't know who NCAT is. So we're a national nonprofit organization that helps people build resilient communities through local and sustainable solutions that reduce poverty, strengthen self-reliance, and protect natural resources. You can find us at the AFTRA Information Service for Farmers under our free technical assistance 800 number and our Ask an Ag email address. We have farmer-friendly publications, videos, tutorials, podcasts, and webinars. And you can find all of this information at atra.ncat.org. One of the things I wanted to share, one of the things that I wanted to share as well is our flagship programs. Our Arm to Farm is armtofarm.org. I won't go into those programs today, but please go to those websites so you can see what our flagship projects are. Our other is Soil for Water and the AgriSolar Clearinghouse. And one of the reasons why I applied for the GLCI project is I would like for my project, along with Linda Coffey, who started this and spearheaded, to be one of our flagship projects. So moving into what we named it, Women, Livestock, and Land. Why? It's a pasture-based livestock enterprise that can be good for the land, livestock, family, and community. Women make great farmers. Research shows that women learn best from other women. So NCAT has a lot of women farmer specialists and female partners. NCAT loves to do hands-on trainings, and we train beginning farmers. So we know the value of peer-to-peer learning, which that is a part of this project. The pilot project was funded by Southern SARE in 2021, again by Linda Coffey, my coworker in Arkansas. It was aimed to empower and equip women farmers who are beginning grass-based livestock enterprises. We touched bases on goal setting, soil health, regenerative grazing, animal handling, health, direct marketing, and to foster community and networking. This was the in-person training in Tennessee. So that's just a few pictures. And now moving on to the project that I really kind of revamped, or I would call it level up to our region. So this is a 2-year project. It is GLCI. The participants are from Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana. 2 per state in-person trainings. You also have access to a web-based learning curriculum that Linda Coffey created with another coworker. You have support following the in-person workshops. We have a partner that I'm getting ready to show you in the next slide. We have office hours, and we want peer-to-peer networks to be created in each state with the ladies. Our partner is Food Animal Concern Trust, FAC, and they will be expanding our existing program with webinars and short courses. They have a mentorship program and then scholarships available for new and beginning farmers, experienced farmers to go to conferences. 2 new programs they're introducing within this project is the Field Day in a Box and the regional workshops. Now, how to apply? Women who are in the Gulf States region can apply beginning today. It closed at the end of April. And here's the link. And I also will put in the chat, we have a shorter link to get to the application process. No lady will be turned away. It just helps me to be organized of where the ladies are resident. Action steps: if you are a woman in the Gulf States, please apply. Also, sign up for ATRA's weekly harvest newsletter. Be sure you're receiving FACT's newsletter and apply for the mentoring program next year. And then check out educational resources from both the ATRA and FACT. And then let us know what you need. We want this project to be communal, that the ladies are cross-pollinating and helping one another, just not just them in their own state. We also have a Facebook group that was created by Linda Coffey, which the new ladies will be added to. So it will be that peer-to-peer help, but also we want to create a state peer-to-peer. The people to get in contact, again, myself, Felicia Bell, and it's FeliciaB@NCAT.org. And then Samantha Gasson at the Food Animal Concerns Trust.org, and Linda Coffey, Linda C, at NCAT.org. And thank you so much for this opportunity to share with you today. One of the tips that I would give you for as application is, as you can see, think outside of the box. When you apply for any type of technical assistance or in-person events that working with the farmer one-on-one, it cannot be just what is known and been done for 30 or 40 years. You have to think outside of the box. And the purpose of this is, we know that it's a lot of people that are shy. And especially within women, they may not speak up when it's a big crowd or if it's a lot of men present, even though they're livestock producers. So that's not, pushing the men out. They're there to help us, and definitely with the equipment demonstrations, which was a big thing for me, to make sure the ladies can work the equipment they own or will own, as well as knowing when to take equipment to a third party or to the shop. So we want to make sure, one, we're assisting the ladies with their budget, that everything does not have to be taken to the shop, but also safety too, and working with your equipment and on your equipment. The last thing that I'm offering that's different from the other cohort is a retreat type space within 3 of the states to let women understand that, yes, we work hard, but we also need to take a mental and physical break. And so we're going to have health and wellness people coming in to share what modalities that can assist women that do this labor intensive work. So I'll pass it back to Pete and wait for the Q&A. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Felicia. Really appreciate that. Great tips there, and definitely jot down your questions that you might have for Felicia. She and our next presenter are going to be available to kind of help you see how they got through it, and maybe that gives you some ideas about how you can get to it. But I want to just lift up that thing you just said, Felicia, which is think outside of the box. That the GLCI program is very open in what it will fund and how it can fund it if it meets the basics that Jane went through. But being creative and trying out new ideas, GLCI is a great space for trying out new ideas to reach new audiences and address new issues. Next, we're going to hear from another GLCI, current GLCI grantee. So I'm going to pass it over to Christian Lovell from the Illinois Grazing Lands Coalition to introduce himself and share a little bit about their work in Illinois.
Thank you very much, Pete. Really appreciate you and all the other hosts for not only putting this on, but having us to share our story as well. I'm Christian Lovell. I'm Executive Director of the Illinois Grazing Lands Coalition. I'm going to give a little bit of background on our organization, what we do, and then we'll dive into the specifics of our GLCI grant. Next slide, Jane. So who we are, our genesis and our mission. Our organization dates back several years, really to the initial GLCI funding. I will say in recent decades, our organization has been a little bit more dormant. We haven't had as much funding in those times. And really what ramped our organization up was the Wallace Center and a lot of the work that Pete did here in Illinois, creating a regenerative grazing roadmap. And our organization ended up being the champion of that roadmap, and we pursued funding out of that work. So today we have a mix of public and private support. Obviously, one of them is the current GLCI grant that we have now. Our organization is basically founded on our grazing group structure. It's a regional structure. We have the state of Illinois divided into 5 regions. Each one has a regional grazing group leader who leads the work in each region. They facilitate that peer-to-peer information sharing, learning network, and community. So looking at our key programs across our grants and across our organization, we host pasture walks. Those are facilitated in each region between our grazing organizers and our regional grazing group leaders. We host grazing schools on an annual basis. We host grazing conferences on an annual basis. And we also, as part of one of our other grant agreements, do on-farm consultation visits with producers. Next slide, Jane. Our GLCI project that we're operating on now is called Building Illinois Grazing. And so we often internally, we call it our big grant. And it is one of our largest grants to date, but BIG actually stands for Building Illinois Grazing. We saw this as a way to expand our reach, expand the programming that we're doing, and expand our offering. The key components of it are an advanced grazing workshop, an ability to host an annual statewide grazing conference, which is really critical to building the grazing community here in Illinois. Several other states have annual conferences. Missouri seems like they're having a conference every 3 months. It seems like Illinois, we hadn't had that. We hadn't had it for several years. We do host, on a rotational basis, the Heart of America grazing conference, but we wanted to have something on the calendar every year here in Illinois, and this grant has allowed us to do that. It provides additional support for our regional grazing groups. It allowed us to purchase and stock a grazing demonstration trailer, which we'll get into here in a second. We've also stood up a Master Grazer Award program where we're recognizing individuals. We actually did that our initial cohort at our grazing conference last month. It's also allowed us to create and establish a partners program where we're partnering with a select number of organizations across the state that really expands our ability to reach new audiences that we normally wouldn't get to. We'll get to that in a minute. And lastly, the big grant helps us with our marketing and promotional efforts to really raise awareness throughout the state. Next slide, Jane. Now I'm quickly going to go through a deeper look at some of these parts of our grant. We're going to look at the conference, our partners program, and then the demonstration trailer. Next slide. So here's our conference. Like I said, we had it last month. It's a 2-day event, over 100 attendees. Dr. Alan Williams, a phenomenal keynote speaker, held a couple sessions on both days. We had various vendors exhibit. We had a producer panel you can see down there on the left and part of the audience. Next slide. Quickly about our partners program. This is like I said, joint program where we host events with these partners. We've got Illinois Beef Association, Illinois Forage and Grasslands Council is a partner, Food Works is a partner, the Conservation Fund is a partner, and we've also got a partner in the Illinois Grazing Partnership. This is something that we're rolling out now. Our first partners program actually kicks off this Saturday in Anna, Illinois with the Illinois Beef Association. And we will be rolling out future pasture walks with our partners over the course of the year ahead. Next slide. And lastly, here I wanted to show our grazing demonstration trailer. This is a trailer that we can feature at ILGLC events, pasture walks, grazing schools. It's outfitted with grazing supplies, and it allows for hands-on instruction. You know, so many times we talk about things, we want to show people. This is going to allow us to facilitate that instruction right there. And I did just want to note in terms of GLCI, that funding covered the trailer itself. It covered all of the supplies to outfit the trailer. It's going to, once we get our logo designed, it's going to wrap the trailer. And then it also allows for mileage expense. So when we pull the trailer, that is reimbursable under the grant as well. Next slide. So again, thank you for letting us be a part today and share this. I will just say, I think when we think about our grant, you know, we wanted to showcase the things we were good at, how we could leverage these funds and this new grant to build on the work we were doing. And that was ultimately successful. And we really, you know, can't speak enough good about the program and what it's done for our organization. Thanks, Pete.
Great. Thank you, Christian. Really appreciate that. And just wanted to lift up one thing there that you said that I think is helpful for the attendees to be mindful of is, you know, something somewhat different than what, you know, Felicia's situation with NCAT, which is fairly well established. Illinois Grazing Lands Coalition really got a lot of capacity, built a lot of you know, your abilities to continue to do this work through this grant and other funding. So I just wanted to underline that because I think some folks come in and say, oh, you know, maybe we're not organized enough. We don't have all the pieces that we think we might need. And just to encourage folks to really, you know, still consider applying and maybe working with other organizations to build capacity in your region for grazing, because that's what GLCI as a funding program is really open to doing. So it can help organizations grow in their abilities to reach farmers and landowners and do the work. So really important and really exciting stuff to see there from ILGLC. So thank you. Hopefully that was helpful for you all to just kind of get the wheels turning a little bit here on what you might potentially want to pursue for your proposal for this program or work with others on. We're getting closer and closer to the Q&A session, and we will open that up before being wrapped up before the top of the hour. But we also wanted to put a few things on the table for you to work with. Obviously, there's the funding opportunity. And as Jane mentioned, you really just need to take the time, take the highlighter, sit down, cup of coffee, and just work your way through that and make sure that you really understand what is available and what is not eligible or available through this program. So that's homework object one. You got to get that one done first. But there's some other things that we're going to share now. We're going to hear from some of our other organizations that are on the call who can share a little bit more about themselves, because we're just one piece of this puzzle right now is the Wallace Center. And they can share a little bit more about the resources that you might be able to leverage or you might be interested in leveraging. The first one is I'll speak to, and I think Jane can drop this in the chat as well. We're going to put a link in there for a Google spreadsheet that should be open and available to everyone. And what's in that sheet is simply a place for you to put yourself down, your organization down, where you might be focused on, what you might be interested in terms of GLCI funding. So that is an invitation for you all. You don't have to put your name or your contact info or anything in there if you don't want to. But a lot of times what we hear in the work that we do at the Wallace Center is people just simply didn't know that their neighbor was interested in the same thing that they were interested in. And we've seen some really great funding applications come through. And again, Jane mentioned it. It needs to have partnership. You've got to have collaboration here, and ideally with people that maybe you don't work with all the time. So that spreadsheet, I see some folks popping in there. The link is in the chat. Feel free to share as much information as you want to in there. And then if you see somebody that you'd like to reach out to, feel free to make that connection. We'll leave it with you all to connect, to figure out if a shared proposal is there for you. So Again, that spreadsheet's a great place to put some info as you're listening to the rest of this webinar. I'm going to hand it over to Margaret at Michael Fields because they also have another thing for you to put on the table that can help you in your journey towards a successful proposal. So Margaret, take it away.
Here we go. Thank you very much. It still says I'm muted. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Oh, okay. It just was delayed, I guess. So, hi, everybody. It's neat to have everyone here, and thank you for the great presentations already. We have at Michael Fields Agricultural Institute free grants advising. We have staff whom you can reach out to, and they will walk you through all the different pieces of the process. We believe it's more important for you to have the chance to actually write your own proposal and discover that you can. But if there are people in your network who you think could really stand having a person walk through the process with them and accompany them in the process. So for example, saying, is this thing that we're wanting to do eligible, helping you go back over the call for proposals and make sure that it is. Are your partnerships, is it clear in your mind what your different partners are going to be doing? And then creating a system for having you put together a proposal. And then if you want, review thinking points, talking points, even review the proposal, all those steps along the way. We do those for all sorts of kinds of proposals, but this is one of them. And we have specialized funding. Much appreciation to our colleague Scott Lasser with Rural Climate Partners and with the Schott Foundation for helping to support that. But I've just put into the chat the link to our grants advising resources. We have all sorts of how do you write proposals information up there. And in addition to that, we have the contact information for our free grants advisor. You'll find it there. That's pretty much all I feel like we need to say, other than please get started early. You heard this earlier from Jane. It's so important, and you will be rewarded for having gotten started early, because you want your partnership to be one where the things can come a little unglued and then get glued back together even better. And that takes some time. So enough from me. Back to you, Pete.
Yeah. Thanks, Margaret. And I think we all owe Margaret a debt of gratitude also for being a longtime champion of the GLCI program and helping it kind of continue to be available to folks. So thank you, Margaret. And I want to just underline again that for your GLCI application, if you're an organization or you are working with organizations that are interested in applying, and you do need a little bit of that help getting the ducks in a row, that Michael Fields is on your team. And that link is really vital. It doesn't cost anything. It doesn't cost anything, especially to have a conversation and see what might make sense for you. So please check that link and also put that into the spreadsheet. If you think you need some help with something, just put it in there. We want you to be successful with your funding application. We all want this program to continue to be really popular. It helps it get more money in the long run. And so please reach out. Yeah, go ahead.
Can I just say this, and just the same reinforcement of the idea? If you're going to send this note out to some of your colleagues and say, did you see that we have this call for proposals? Please feel free to send along this link and invite them to use the website, also our free grants advising. It's intended to be helping people. And if you can help get the word out to somebody you think could really benefit from it, that's just great.
Great. Thanks, Margaret. We're going to pass it over now to Ellen at the National Grazing Lands Coalition, also a longtime champion for the GLCI and grazing programs, to share a little bit about how they might be able to be helpful. So Ellen, do you want to introduce yourself and share a little bit?
Yeah, thanks so much, Pete. So my name is Ellen Harrell. I am actually the Marketing and Communications Director for the National Grazing Lands Coalition, but also formerly the Executive Director of the Louisiana Grazing Lands Conservation Initiative. And so we were a state coalition that did also apply last year and got a GLCI grant accepted. So I personally would love to be a resource navigating through that. But like Christian mentioned earlier, with their funding being a state coalition, our goal with NatGLC is to work with our other state coalitions to ensure that this funding can work with them. But I'm here today to really encourage all of you guys, if you are looking to do a diverse proposal and want to get connected either with your state coalition or kind of like Christian mentioned, this funding was able to help revitalize a coalition. And there are many states that I'm working with that have interested producers who want to be a part of a state coalition. But we are just working to make sure that all the states have that general support for producer-led groups.
Great, thank you, Ellen. Really appreciate Nat GLC's work. And just to underline a couple things there, these programs and these proposals work better in collaboration. So even if you just know what your neighbor state is doing, your neighbor region is doing, being able to reference that in your proposal, even if you're not working directly together, but you see each other and you understand that maybe you're kind of helping people in the same way, that's only going to make things better for your proposal. So Nat GLC is a good hub, air traffic controller. They can help you figure out who's doing what where. So Ellen, maybe if you want to, oh, you've already done it right in the chat there, Ellen's email. So if you want to reach out there. Last but certainly not least, I wanted to pass the mic over to Jesse from the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition for an advocacy opportunity. So Jesse, if you want to take it away.
Thanks, Pete. Hey, everybody. We are talking about the opportunity to get funding for GLCI a whole lot today, but I think it's also really important that everybody knows the funding for GLCI projects is made available annually through the federal appropriations process, which means these opportunities don't show up unless we tell appropriators that we want these dollars. So it is FY25 appropriations season right now in Congress, which means right now is the time to tell federal appropriators we need more GLCI money in future. So I just dropped in the chat an organizational and farmer sign-on letter that we are leading, trying to get somewhere north of 150 signatures so that we can show those federal appropriators that there is strong support for this program, that folks do want to see more dollars. And the ask we have on the table for this fiscal year is $30 million for next year's pool of funding. So that would be an increase from what we saw in the last package. We really think it's necessary. We think that this round of funding, which is at like $22 million, is going to go right out the door. And so we want to keep building in future. Please sign on your organization. If you are a farm or an ag business of any kind, please sign on to the letter and please distribute to your networks as broadly as you possibly can. We're going to hold this open through next Friday for sure. So you've got a little bit of time to sign and share. And we are very soon going to have a series of action alerts out asking for folks to call their ag appropriators and make this same request. So if you have a member of the House Ag Appropes Committee in your state, the state of California, Georgia, Illinois, Maryland, Ohio, Virginia, or Washington, you might see these action alerts filtering through your networks. Please encourage folks to call. And as far as Senate side appropriators, we're doing action alerts for Kansas, Maine, Michigan, Mississippi, Montana, North Dakota, Nebraska, New Mexico, Oregon, Washington, and Wisconsin. So again, if you see those showing up, please encourage folks to make those phone calls. They really do make a difference and help us win this money long term. And I think that's it from me. Back to you, Pete.
Awesome. Thank you, Jesse, and the NSAC team. They fight to make sure this money continues to show up, and that ask of joining the sign-on letter is critical because your organization or your business or whatever on that line just adds weight to that letter that says we need to keep the GLCI program funded and increase that funding year to year. One thing I'll mention there of what's in it for you beyond feeling good and helping good things be in the world is that the GLCI program sustains organizations year to year, and that you can continue to be funded by these programs, from one fiscal year to the next. And so it's a great way to continue to build your programming, but we need to have dollars in that program for you to build off of. And so please just take a minute, read that sign-on letter, pass it around, the more the merrier. And next Friday, I see that in there. Jesse just highlighting that question. Really appreciate it. So let's move on just one more slide here, and then we're getting back to the barn here, and I want to get to your questions, but I want to just list a few USDA resources here, because again, I don't work for the USDA, none of us do. If they are, we hope we're doing justice to your program if they're on this call. But there is a website out there for the GLCI program. There's a long URL here. It's not hard to find. Just put it in your search. You'll find Grazing Lands Conservation Initiative, USDA, and they'll have the information there, a press release, and some of the other links that we've already shared to the notice of funding opportunity. That lives on grants.gov. So you can go to that website. We've got the NOFO on there, 1313, that you can find that. And again, it's an NRCS program. That link is in the chat, but if you forget and you don't get it, make sure you go to grants.gov and you can search this funding opportunity as well as a bunch of other funding opportunities, everything the government is providing on there. And then I also just wanted to put Michael's contact on here as well. That is the point of contact at USDA. If you have any questions that you want to go directly to them with, reach out to Michael Margot there at USDA. And that email, again, is also on the main USDA NRCS website for this program. So we just threw a bunch of information at you. Hopefully you're not overwhelmed. Hopefully you're feeling excited about what you can get funded through GLCI and what you want to get working on for that May 26th deadline. But we want to shift it back and just see what questions y'all have. And so feel free, you can put them in the chat if you'd like, if you want to raise your hand and come off mute. And you can ask questions on anything about the funding opportunity, to Felicia, to Christian, to any of the folks who just spoke about resources. Feel free. Or if you're a current grantee and you want to share a little bit about your experience, you also would love to hear how that's going for you. So feel free, if you have any questions, chat, or go ahead and raise your hand and come off mute. And Jane, if we have any questions queued up, maybe that would be a good thing we could start with.
Yeah, we had a question from Anna for Christian or Felicia or anyone else who's gotten GLCI funding. Question is, how are you as a grantee planning to sustain your program after the GLCI grant ends? Great question.
Christian or Felicia, both of you want to speak to that?
So one of the goals, as you all heard, I said I wanted it like a flagship, one of our flagship projects. Once it becomes that, then we're sought after for our projects when it becomes that. So that's one thing I'm thinking about. Linda and I do want to see this be a national, so move around the country, since hers was in Arkansas and now ours in the Gulf State. So we will be going after other funding. But we want to put the emphasis on us doing the great work where we will be sought after. And so other people will be getting the grant funding and kind of hiring us to do it.
Yeah, and I'll kind of share different pieces. I think when you look at our big grant, what we call the big grant, there's different pieces of it that long-term, there's a different strategy for long-term. I'll give you an example. On the conference, that is something we're hoping can become self-sustainable through, registration fees, through vendor exhibits. Actually, looking at the way this year turned out, I think not only in the as we go forward in the future and grow both of those, the registration and the sponsorships, not only will that allow us to host that each year, but I think it could also be a bit of a revenue source for the organization overall. Again, though, this grant is helping us get it off the ground, and really make sure that the first couple ones that we're doing are successful. And like I said, when we get it on people's calendar, everyone knows that it's coming every year. We look for that to be self-sustaining. Other aspects of it are going to require, different strategies. But we'll be looking forward to solve those at a later date.
Yeah, thank you both. That's a really great question on how do you get something started, and more importantly, how do you keep it going on the long run. So hopefully that was helpful there. I also see a familiar hand from Sarah over in North Carolina. Sarah, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Sure. Hey, y'all. Thank you so much for putting this together. I was curious, excuse me. I was curious on what is the if there's a major preference on multiple state applications versus intrastate application, assuming the robust partnerships are there.
Jane, I can take a crack at that, and then others, maybe Jane, you have a comment. So Sarah, my understanding is that, much like Felicia's project, multi-state opportunities are totally okay and eligible. I think more often than not, you can see like just within one state that there might be programs, but really, if, like you said, if the collaboration is strong, if what you're trying to accomplish is really clear and meets the mandates for GLCI, I think that there's a great opportunity to build partnerships more broadly across a region. And I think that that's also reflective of the fact that the GLCI program is pretty expansive in what it will fund. And so sometimes you need a bigger geography to accomplish your goal and a bigger catchment. One thing I would suggest, and this is a way to kind of reference folks back to that collaborative spreadsheet that we shared and encourage them to fill it out, is sometimes it's good to just know if your neighbor is building a program that you can have two separate projects that might work together, but be maybe separate and have a little bit more funding as a result of that. So something just to take into consideration and maybe an incentive to fill out that spreadsheet, if that's helpful for you, Sarah.
It is. Thanks, y'all.
Yeah,
And
thanks,
I just
Jane. I see
dropped
that
in
link
the
there. Yeah, go
chat.
ahead.
Yeah. So this is a list of all of the applications that were funded in 2023, which includes Christian and Felicia's groups. And you can see there are plenty that are focused just on one state, but lots of applications that focused on a 3, 4, even 6, 7 state region from more kind of regional national organizations. So all are good.
So while you're thinking of maybe your final questions, because I'm not seeing any maybe more that are coming through here, I did see one that came through earlier when folks filled out their application, and there was the big question that everyone has about how awful is the application process and how practical is the implementation timeline. So one thing I would say is that it is a federal funding application, so it's going to be a kind of a degree of hard because there's a lot of things that you have to do. That's the plug again for the support from the organizations that are on here, especially what Margaret shared for Michael Fields, that you don't have to go that alone. And it's also a great way to maybe work with others that you might know from this call that have gone through it before. You now know Felicia, you now know Christian and other folks. And I think there's a lot of folks that are happy to help answer some questions. So it is, there are some tips there. The NOFO is usually, the Notice of Funding Opportunity is usually pretty good at laying out what you need and being explicit about that. And also you can always email the folks at USDA. I have emailed them, they get back very, very quickly. They know that they need to be answering questions. The point about the timeline, and this might be also something for Christian and Felicia to mention as well, is it's important to know that there's two different pools of funding within this. One is a shorter period, a 1 to 2 year period, and those are for smaller projects. And then there's a 3 to 4 year period, I believe, that is much larger projects. And so just to think about that and where you want to put yourself, because sometimes it takes a year just to get yourself up to speed. And then if you're on a short project, you really got to start wrapping it up by about the midpoint when you're just getting ahead of steam. So I want to just open that up to see if Felicia and Christian had any comments on the timeline that you're on now, if that feels like not enough or just right, or what you might suggest to that question.
So with our project, everything kind of got shifted back a little bit, but we was graciously able to really start our timeline when contract was signed. So we were very, very happy about that just because it was different things needed to be tweaked. Once that was told to us that it was funded. And so, but we're very grateful for that time that we weren't, depleted of time for the actual project. So just take that in consideration. Like Pete said, you have to be ready to work when that funding occurs. So getting your partners all together and getting things laid out way before the funding comes through.
Yeah, and I'd say for us, so ours is 2 years. I will say that feels like a very that feels like a very short time horizon, right? Because this year's the first year, but next year is the last year. But it does allow us to as if we are going to reapply, it does allow us to make those tweaks. And I think we will look at this next time of maybe a longer time horizon, but we know what's going to work for us. So I would say in our case, it worked out well to do the shorter project first, figure out where our needs were and what worked, and then pursue a longer opportunity.
Thank you both. Last call for questions. Any other questions before we take us home here and wrap up this webinar? Feel free to raise your hand or throw it in the chat. All right. Well, maybe Jane, if you don't mind, as we close out, maybe you could just share back up some of the contact info here. A few of the folks that spoke here and the email we put on there. And then I know that Ellen and Felicia and Christian and folks have shared their contact info in the chat. So feel free to grab that and share that if you'd like. The best way to stay in touch, again, is that spreadsheet that we shared. So I'm going to drop these links one more time in the chat. You can share your interest on that spreadsheet, and we will do our best to get you in touch with folks. There's also this proposal support. Do not sleep on that. That's a pretty rare opportunity in some instances to be able to have that support. Michael Fields is unique and wonderful in many ways. That link there, and then also that sign-on letter, as Jesse mentioned from NSAC. We need your support to keep the funding wheels moving on the GLCI program. But we'll leave it there. Really appreciate gratitude. And yes, thank you, Jane. That follow-up email with all this, you'll get that in your inbox if you're here today. But a lot of gratitude for our presenters today, for the co-host today. Really appreciate it. And gratitude for you all as you go forward and get your funding proposals together for this by May 26th. Don't wait, get going on that. We look forward to seeing all the great grazing work that you all do through this program. So thanks for your time, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Pete. Great job.
Thank you. Thanks all.